The steam stopped rising. Bruce Lee lifted the porcelain cup to his lips. The jasmine tea was still hot against his tongue. Morning light filtered through bamboo blinds, casting tiger stripes across wooden tables. The tea house hummed with the quiet murmur of Kowloon regulars. Elderly men bent over newspapers, Mrs. Lin wiping down the counter with slow, methodical circles. Then the door exploded inward. A young man burst through. His face twisted, jaw clenched, veins bulging at his temples, eyes red and wild. Danny. Bruce recognized him instantly, but barely. The student he'd trained 3 years ago had vanished. This was something raw, something broken. "You ruined my life," the words detonated across the room. Conversations died mid-sentence. Newspapers froze. Mrs. Lin's cloth stopped moving. Danny's voice cracked louder. "You ruined everything." Bruce set the cup down, no hurry. No reaction. The porcelain met wood with a soft click that somehow cut through the silence. He didn't stand, didn't speak. Every pair of eyes swiveled between them. Danny's fists trembled at his sides, knuckles bone white. His breathing came in ragged bursts. He took one step forward, and Bruce still hadn't moved. Danny's voice fractured like breaking glass. "I used what you taught me." The words dropped into the silent tea house. His chest heaved. Sweat traced lines down his temples despite the morning coolness. "A man's in the hospital." Each syllable carried the weight of confession. Peter Hoffman, intensive care, broken jaw, fractured ribs, internal bleeding. His hands trembled at his sides. "I'm facing assault charges." Criminal charges. Danny's eyes burned with something between rage and desperation. "You made me dangerous." Bruce's expression remained unchanged. No flicker of surprise, no judgment etched into his features. He lifted his porcelain cup with the same measured grace he'd shown before the interruption. The clink of ceramic against wood sounded impossibly loud. Steam curled upward, carrying the scent of jasmine between them. Bruce set the cup down with deliberate care. His fingers rested lightly on the table's worn surface. "What exactly did I teach you?" The question hung in the air like smoke, simple, direct. But beneath those 6 words lay something far more complex. Mrs. Lin's breath caught audibly behind the counter. 2 elderly regulars leaned forward, teacups forgotten. Danny's mouth opened, closed. The answer should have been immediate, obvious. But the silence stretched, and he had no words. Danny's hands trembled, fists clenched, then released. The fingers wouldn't stay still. "You taught me to fight, to hurt people." Bruce leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced slowly, deliberately. The movement carried weight like a lock clicking shut. "No," his voice remained level. "I taught you techniques and when to use them." The distinction hung between them like smoke. "Did you act in self-defense?" The question landed with surgical precision. Danny's jaw worked, his throat moved, no sound came out. Behind the counter, Mrs. Lin froze mid-pour. The teapot hovered above a cup, steam curling upward in lazy spirals. Her eyes darted between the 2 men. The liquid inside waited, suspended. The silence stretched. Every patron in the tea house stopped breathing. A newspaper rustled, then went still. Someone's chopsticks clicked against porcelain, then nothing. Bruce waited. His gaze never wavered. Danny's shoulders began to rise and fall faster. His chest heaved. The muscles in his neck stood out like cables under tension. Still, he said nothing, because the answer wasn't self-defense. It never was, and both men knew it now. The weight of that unspoken truth pressed down on the room like a physical force, suffocating and inescapable, and what Danny would say next would determine whether he was still the student Bruce once believed in or something else entirely. Danny's gaze fell to the floorboards. Someone insulted Michelle. His voice barely rose above the hum of the ceiling fan. At the bar, called her. He swallowed. "I got angry, real angry." His hands opened and closed at his sides. Fists remembering, "I hit him hard, kept hitting." The words came faster now, tumbling out like confessions before a priest. Peter Hoffman, he's in intensive care at Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Broken jaw. Fractured skull. Danny's shoulders curled inward. 3 weeks now and he still can't. They don't know if he'll. The unfinished sentence hung in the air thick as incense. Bruce exhaled slowly through his nose. A long, measured breath that seemed to empty something more than lungs. He unfolded his hands and placed them flat on the table, the wood grain cool beneath his palms. "Then you didn't use what I taught," Bruce said. "No anger, no disappointment. Just statement, you used technique without philosophy." Danny's head snapped up. "I spent more time teaching you when not to fight," Bruce continued. His voice carried through the tea house, not loud but clear as temple bells. Every class, every sparring session, control, restraint, the warrior who doesn't need to prove himself. He leaned forward slightly. "Did you hear those lessons, Danny, or only the strikes?" But what Danny said next would change everything Bruce thought he knew about responsibility. Danny's voice rose, desperate now. "You made me a weapon, that's on you." The words hung in the humid air between them. Bruce stood. The movement was simple, unhurried, but chairs scraped across wooden floorboards as patrons shifted backward. Conversations died mid-sentence. Mrs. Lynde's hand froze on the counter, fingers pressed white against the lacquered surface. "I gave you a tool," Bruce said. His voice carried through the silence without rising. "You chose how to use it." Danny's jaw clenched. Sweat beaded along his temple despite the morning coolness. "If I teach carpentry," Bruce continued, each word deliberate, weighted, "the builder chooses to construct homes or weapons. The hammer doesn't determine the outcome, the hand that swings it does." The scent of jasmine tea drifted between them, delicate against the thickness of the moment. "That's easy philosophy when you're not facing prison," Danny shot back, but his voice wavered now, cracking at the edges. Bruce's gaze didn't waver, didn't soften. The morning light through bamboo blinds cast thin shadows across his face, highlighting the stillness in his posture. Few could stand that calm when accused. Fewer still could hold it without anger. Danny's hands curled into fists, and in that suspended breath, everyone watching knew the confrontation had crossed into something far more dangerous. Danny's palm struck Bruce's shoulder, hard. The impact echoed through the silence, a dull thud against muscle and bone. Bruce's body absorbed the force. He didn't stumble, didn't sway, didn't shift his weight even an inch backward. His arms remained loose at his sides, hands open, fingers relaxed. His chest rose, fell, steady. The morning light sliced through bamboo blinds in golden bars, striping Bruce's face half in shadow, half in calm illumination. Dust motes hung suspended in the beams. Someone's breath caught audibly near the window. Mrs. Lynde's teapot stopped mid-tilt, the liquid inside trembling but not pouring. Danny's hand still pressed against that shoulder, waiting for retaliation that never came. Bruce's gaze held steady on Danny's face, not with challenge but with something harder to bear, compassion laced with disappointment. No anger flickered in those dark eyes. No tension gathered in his jaw. Few could understand the discipline required to stand so utterly still when struck, to choose vulnerability over dominance. Danny pushed again, harder this time, nothing. The choice now belonged entirely to one man, and everyone watching knew which lesson would define him. Violence met with violence, or something he'd never truly learned until this breath, this heartbeat, this unbearable moment stretched between them like a wire pulled taut enough to sing. Bruce's voice cut through the silence like a blade through water. "You're trying to make me fight to prove martial arts is violence." He stepped forward, steady, unhurried. "I'm refusing. To prove it's about control." The morning light caught the side of his face, casting half in shadow. He tilted his head slightly, meeting Danny's eyes with an unwavering calm that felt more devastating than any strike. "Which of us practices what I taught?" The words landed harder than fists. Danny's breathing shifted, ragged, uneven, the rhythm of a man drowning. His shoulders trembled. The rage that had held him upright for weeks began to crack like old porcelain, fractures spreading fast and deep. His fists unclenched, finger by finger. The anger collapsed into something else entirely, something raw and exposed. His chest heaved. His jaw worked soundlessly. Tears blurred his vision, and he didn't bother wiping them away. He stood there, stripped bare before the man he'd tried to destroy. Mrs. Lynn watched from behind the counter, her hand pressed against her mouth. Bruce took another step closer, and Danny realized he had nowhere left to run. The words came out strangled, unrecognizable. "I don't know what to do." Danny's legs gave out. He collapsed into the chair behind him, the wood groaning under the sudden weight. His hands covered his face. Shoulders shook. "I'm scared." Bruce moved without hurry. He pulled out the opposite chair and sat, the bamboo blinds casting striped shadows across the table between them. His posture remained open, unthreatening. Good. Danny's head lifted slightly. Confusion flickered through the tears. "Fear means you understand consequences now." Bruce's voice carried no judgment. "That's growth. The first step." The tea house felt smaller somehow, warmer. Mrs. Lynn appeared at their table, fresh pot in hand. She set down 2 clean cups without a word, poured the jasmine tea in smooth arcs. Steam curled upward, filling the space with subtle fragrance. She retreated just as silently. Bruce slid 1 cup toward Danny. "Let's talk about what happens next." Danny stared at the tea. His throat worked. "The police. They'll charge me. Peter's family, yes." Bruce's calm didn't waver. "And you'll face that, but you won't face it as the man who walked in here today." Few could understand the weight of what Bruce offered in that moment, or the price Danny would pay when the courtroom doors opened 3 weeks later. The gavel struck wood once. Danny sat rigid in the defendant's chair, fingers digging into the armrests. The Hong Kong District Court smelled of old varnish and closed air. Judge Harrison's gray robes rustled as he leaned forward, eyes scanning the witness stand. Bruce stepped up, his hand steady on the rail. "Mr. Lai," Thomas Brennan began, "did you teach the defendant to inflict violence?" "I taught techniques," Bruce said quietly. "Control, discipline, when not to use force." His gaze shifted to Danny. "I also taught choice. Every lesson emphasized restraint over reaction." Helen Kwok rose. "Did he misuse what you taught?" "He used the technique, not the philosophy." The distinction hung in the courtroom like smoke. Judge Harrison nodded slowly, pen scratching across paper. Danny stood when called, his voice cracked but held firm. I did this, not Bruce, not martial arts." "Me," his shoulders sagged. "I accept full responsibility." The judge's gavel tapped twice. 6 months reduced custody, mandatory counseling, community service teaching at-risk youth about martial discipline and ethical responsibility. Danny's throat tightened. He nodded. Outside, the city roared with possibility and danger. But whether he'd truly become the teacher instead of the weapon, only time would prove that answer. 4 years had passed since the courtroom. The Kowloon Community Center smelled of floor wax and sweat. Danny stood before 15 teenagers, their restless energy filling the practice space. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. He didn't demonstrate a strike. Instead, he held up his right hand. "Bruce Lee taught me how to fight," he said. His voice carried no pride. "I misused that." A kid in the back row smirked. "So what?" "Fighting's fighting." Danny met his eyes. "I put a man in the hospital because I was angry, not because I had to, because I wanted to." The smirk faded. "Then Bruce Lee taught me responsibility." He lowered his hand. "I didn't misuse that lesson." The room went quiet. Few could understand the weight of that distinction without living through its consequences. Danny stepped closer to the skeptical teenager, no threat in his posture, only honesty. "The harder teaching was more valuable," he continued. "You'll leave here knowing techniques, that's easy. Whether you carry wisdom with them, that's the real test." The boy's jaw tightened. Then he nodded. The legacy wasn't technique, it was choice. And Danny had finally learned which one mattered.